All right, good morning, church. It's a great Sunday, isn't it? Half of you think it's a great Sunday. Okay, the other half of you, I don't know what your Sunday's like, but we're going to make it great. Is that okay with you guys? Okay, got a third of those people. It's going to be a good day. At least I'm going to have a good day, whether you do or not, all right? So today we are in a brand new series called Intentional Christmas. How many are happy it's the Christmas season? Yeah? Okay, that was a little bit more than half. That's congratulations. You're waking up this morning. I like it. So today we're going to kick off this new series, and we're going to learn from a couple of guys in the Bible. Before I do that, though, I want to pull your attention to something that's going to be in the lobby after service is over. Today's what we call a Kingdom Builder Sunday. We take the first Sunday of every month, and we talk about kind of what God is doing through our church and in our church and around our city because you care, because of your generosity. And so we've put this book together that kind of celebrates all the things, shows you all the things that we did last year. We gave them out to everyone last week, so you can get them, pick them up in the lobby. If you missed them last week, you can grab one of these. And also at the end of it, kind of shows you some of the things we want to take on in the next year. And there's some really cool projects in here, some good things that we want to do, but we get to do them at the speed of you. Whatever you want to have these things happen, whenever you want to see these things happen, we get to do them because of you. And so you are such a great part of what God is doing in our city, in our nation, in our world, and I'm so thankful for you. And so pick one of these up on your way out. If you didn't get one, if you did get one last week, be praying. And so what we do at the end of the year, every year, is Christmas Eve, we give an offering, like we do at every service. But at this service in particular, there's 4 of them, we give everything away that is collected to the projects listed in this book. Does that make sense? And so everything we collect that, and so I want you to ask God, hey, what can I do to be a part of this? God, what do you want me to do to be a part of what you're doing in the world around us? And so go through this book, pray through it, ask God, what do I do? And then just do what he says. Deal? All right, just doing what God says. That's a hard ask, isn't it? So today we're going to kick off this series, Intentional Christmas. And I know that this time of year can get really cluttered. Anybody else feel that? If you have family around, there's get-togethers. If you have office culture, there's office parties. If you have kids, there's all the kids' plays. There's shopping. There's all the things you just have to get done. In life can get really cluttered really fast. And so what I want to do throughout this series is focus our attention on some of the things that just absolutely must be a part of Christmas and become very intentional and very focused on some of the things that we need to do. And that gives us permission to ignore some of the things we don't have to do, right? So no matter what you're doing, let's be intentional. So somewhat of a theme verse. I don't know if I'll read it every week, but this kind of kicks off our theme. 1 Corinthians says this, chapter 10, verse 31. So whether you eat or drink or whatever you do it all for the glory of God. So when you're going to the Christmas party at work and you're kind of going, do I really want to be here? Hey, how can you glorify God on that night? Right? If you're going to see the family that maybe there's that one uncle, you're like, yeah, I'm not so sure about him. How can you glorify God with those conversations? When you're shopping and the last flat screen TV is there and somebody else wants it, you punch them in the face to the glory of God. No, I'm just kidding. Don't do that. Don't do that. So what you should do is glorify God in everything, though, right? In this season, it's easy to forget that we're celebrating what God did for us by sending his son Jesus. It's easy to forget the intentionality behind it all. God had a plan through all of this, and I want to remind you that God intentionally sent his son, and we can intentionally glorify God in everything we do. That's this season. And so today, as you begin to plan, I know some of you are thinking about shopping lists and meals and reservations you need to make. Can you just pause for a second and get really intentional about what God says about this season, what God says about you, and what he's encouraging us to do? Is that cool with you guys? Now, this is a season of giving, and I remember when I was younger, there was a gift that my parents gave me that kind of changed my life in a positive way. Anybody else have a gift that you're like, that kind of set a destiny for me, a course for me? Yeah? Okay. So when I was young, I was probably about 3 years old, maybe a little older than that. And I walk out on Christmas morning, and right next to the tree, leaning against the tree, was something that began to shape my life. It was a Zebco 33. Does anybody know what a Zebco 33 is? I got one whoop, two whoops. Yeah, okay. The rest of you are going, I don't have a clue. The Zebco 33 with a pistol grip rod, okay? Look, check this out. It's a fishing reel. This is an old beat up one because mine looked just like that. It looked just like, it's like a spin caster, kind of mixed between a spinning reel and a bait caster with a pistol grip. Fishing, okay? If you guys don't have any clue, fishing. I was about 3 years old, and it began to shape the course of my life. Because throughout my life, I just became obsessed with catching different kinds of fish, knowing the different fish, going out and learning how to do it. And you guys are going, that sounds terrible. It's awful. It's slimy. It's smelly. It's whatever. But I loved it. And I cannot tell you how many times going fishing kept me away from things I probably shouldn't have been doing as a teenager. You know what I'm saying? That love and that pursuit, it shaped my life, and it gave me a love for the water, which then turned, I was a rower in high school. I just began to love to be out there, and it just began to shape my life. And I wonder if there are some gifts in your life that have done the same thing, but I know in the book of Matthew, chapter 2, we get to hear about some gifts that begin to shape the life of a man named Jesus. You ever hear of him? Jesus was born in a little town of Bethlehem. And he received some gifts. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go to Matthew chapter 2. I'm going to read the entire story to you guys. And then we're going to go back into the story and take little snippets of it and begin to learn about what God is doing in us, or what we can do as this gift goes on. Does that make sense? Okay, so let's read the story together. Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea during the reign of King Herod. About the time, some wise men from eastern lands arrived in Jerusalem asking, "Where is the newborn king of the Jews? We saw his star as it rose, and we have come to worship him." King Herod was deeply disturbed when he heard this, as was everyone in Jerusalem, and he called a meeting of the leading priests and teachers of religious law and asked, "Where is the Messiah supposed to be born?" In Bethlehem in Judea, they said. And Herod called for a private meeting with the wise men. And he learned from them the time when the star first appeared. And he told them, "Go to Bethlehem and search carefully for the child. And when you find him, come back to me and tell me so that I can worship him too," which is a lie. It's not true, okay? Okay, next one. After this interview, the wise men went on their way, and the star they had seen in the east guided them to Bethlehem and went ahead of them and stopped over the place where the child was. And when they saw the star, they were filled with joy. They entered the house and saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and they worshiped him. Then they opened their treasure chest and gave him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And when it was time to leave, they returned to their own country by another route, for God had warned them in a dream not to return to Herod, because Herod wanted to kill Jesus, not worship Jesus. Now, there's a couple things in this story that I got to point out, just kind of to ruin your nativity scene for a second. Can I do that? Okay, so Jesus was born in a stable for animals, and he was laid in the manger. That's the feeding trough, right? And your nativity scene has the sheep and the lamb and the shepherds and the angel up above and the star. And then you get these three guys on the side known as the three wise men. Other names for them are three kings or the magi. You guys hear all those names before? Okay, so according to this story, when Jesus was born, the star came about. So when the wise men saw the star, Jesus was born, and the wise men were where? Not there. So at your nativity at home, the table, whatever it's on, slide everything to one side really far, and then take the wise men and just put them like way over to the side, because that's really the way it is. That's pretty cool, right? You're like, TJ, thanks for ruining everything. I had it all perfectly set. You ever grow up at a house where your mom wouldn't let you touch the nativity scene? Yeah, you're like, don't you go home and move the wise men and say it's historically accurate, okay? When you visit her this holiday season, just got to slide it over. This is truly what happened. In fact, that we don't even know how many wise men there were. There could have been 2, it's plural. It could have been 12, we don't know, but the only reason we assume 3 is because there were 3 gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh, right? But that's an assumption. There might have been 3, there might have been many more, many less, okay? So, but whatever it is, you got to so you guys kind of get the context of the story, right? The wise men are far away. They're coming to worship Jesus. And in fact, these guys, they were not, the word wise men is our translation of it. The fact is that they were probably astrologers. which means they looked to the stars to find signs of what was happening in the world. They tried to predict and prophesy. They were not Jewish because Jesus was born in Jerusalem, in Bethlehem, which is in Judea, which is a Jewish nation, Israel, right? And they were living somewhere far off. They were not Jewish. And they were looking at the stars, and they came to the conclusion that this star, this one special star, meant that there was a newborn king of the Jews. And it rose in the west, they're from the east, and they began to travel towards the star. Now, what's interesting in this story is, even though they were not followers of God, and even though they didn't worship God, God still chose to speak to them in a way that they could understand. Isn't that pretty cool? That doesn't matter who you are or where you are, whether you call yourself a Christian or not, God can still speak to you in a way that you understand. Now, it's beautiful because these men, they didn't know everything about Judaism. They didn't know where the newborn king of the Jews was supposed to be born. They had to ask the royal advisors, and then it came to Bethlehem. That's where he is. But God still spoke to them, and the reason why they got to hear it is because, I'm going to give you some points today. Is that cool with you guys? If you're taking notes, you can write this down. The reason why they got to hear what God was saying is because they were looking for God. They actually were intentional to the point where they were looking, they were seeking. They had an eye to the sky. And when this star came about, they recognized it. Do you think everyone in Israel could have seen the star too? Do you think King Herod and all the wise people there could have seen the star? Yeah, but it meant nothing to them because they weren't looking for it. In your life, there might be something there that God has been trying to, hello, and we're just not even looking. We're not intentional. Does that make sense? And so today, I wonder if we slowed down in this season, if we would begin to understand that God is speaking to us. Now, the star was not the point of the story. Like, we got the star up here, right? It's beautiful. It's glittery, it's sparkly. I don't know what the star really looked like, but that's probably what it looked like. Okay. Okay. But the star wasn't the thing that was the point of it all. The star was a sign, and the sign pointed them to Jesus. I believe that God will give you, if you're looking for them, signs. Things that just point you to Him. You don't worship the sign. You don't look for the sign. You look for Him. And when you look for Him, you're going to find clues on where He is in your life. Does that make sense? Look at this, Matthew chapter 2, verse 2. We're kind of going to walk through the story and review it. Where is the newborn king of the Jews, they asked. We saw his star as it rose. We were looking, and when it rose across the horizon, we saw it. We were ready for it. We followed it. We chased after it because it was a sign that pointed us to Jesus. In your life, can I encourage you? Find ways to look for Jesus in your everyday life. I think there's some times in our life where we just miss God. We miss these moments, these signs, because we just aren't looking. Maybe it's a simple conversation with your kid that you're like, wow, I feel like God kind of spoke to me in that moment, right? Like we were leading them and guiding them and helping them. Maybe when somebody's on the side of the road and their car's not working properly, maybe that's a sign that, hey, man, I need to use the gifts that God has given me. I need to help that person. Or maybe it's a financial thing you can do, or a neighbor, or a family member. Whatever it is, God is opening up opportunity. We need to be looking for it, don't we? There's an intentionality to all of this that we need to have. The second thing that we can learn from these guys, these wise guys, is that they came to worship. They came to worship Jesus. They didn't come to go, let's investigate this a little further. Let's see if this is real. Let's have a healthy dose of skepticism. Let's take it all with a grain of salt. Like they didn't have that. They were just, look what they said when they showed up on the scene in the other half of verse number 2. We saw the star as it rose, and we came to worship Him. We came ready, baby. We didn't come to worship a star. We didn't come to talk to King Herod. We came for one and only person, and that is Jesus. And I think in our life, sometimes when we find God, when we look and we walk into the doors of the church, or we're out there in the community doing something for Him, are we worshiping Jesus? Are we doing it, as the book of 1 Corinthians taught us earlier in this message, are we doing it for the glory of God? Are we worshiping Him with our life? And can I tell you, Jesus is so very worthy of all of your worship. I'll say it again because only like 2 people picked that up. Because Jesus is so very worthy of all of our worship. Isn't that right? Because when we don't have peace, who brings peace? When we don't have hope, who brings us hope? When we don't have the strength to make it through this next season, who gives us that strength? The one who is worthy of all the worship. And the wise men look at the star and they said, yep, that's it. And they didn't worship the star. They followed the sign that pointed to the miracle that is Jesus. And when they got there, they were ready to worship. They had anticipated this moment. They journeyed with the intent of worshiping him. Now think of the effort that required. Think of it. They had to get their supplies ready. They got their gifts in order. They were prepared to see the star. They were looking, and they loaded it all up on camels or donkeys or on their backs, whatever it was. And they began to journey to an unknown destination. And they came upon the city of Jerusalem, and they had to talk to the king, and they had to find out where this Jesus was being born. And the star disappears, and then it comes back, and it's not in the east anymore, it's in the south. And they moved down to Bethlehem and they worshiped Jesus, and they had to find this man. All this effort just to worship Jesus. And here we come in on a Sunday morning with padded seats and air conditioning and go, not feeling it. Right? You ever have those days? Come on, let's ride a camel for 3 months and see what worship you got, right? Let's eat off the back of a camel every once in a while and go find baby Jesus in this little town called Bethlehem where Herod is trying to kill him. Let's do all that and see if we're ready to worship, right? See, they were ready. Nothing could push them apart. Like some of us go, I can't worship Jesus today. I'm just tired. It's too cold outside. It's too hot outside. It's too not nice outside to go to church. Like whatever the excuse is we can come up with, we'll come up with it, right? But we need to be ready. We need to worship the one who is really worthy of worship. And these wise men got it. They got it. And they made the journey and they made the effort and they pursued him in worship. Next thing they did is they rejoiced. They rejoiced. They smiled. They were happy. When they saw this star, they were like, oh yeah, it's on. Like one of the values we have as a staff and as a church is that we really do like to enjoy life. Like, I don't know about you, I grew up in church and there were many, many services where I don't think anybody smiled the entire time. Right? Like they forgot that Jesus rose again. They still feel like, oh, Jesus is dead, right? Like they're just kind of home. But I love it when our church begins to rejoice. I love it when we smile and we laugh and we joke around with each other and we celebrate what God is doing. And that's what the wise men were doing. They rejoiced. Look at this in Matthew chapter 2, verse 9. And the star they had seen in the east guided them to Bethlehem. So they saw it in the east. It was in the east. Now they're in Jerusalem. And guess what city is south of Jerusalem? Bethlehem. So the star that was in the east is now in the south. Talk about a miracle, right? Like over there. And it went ahead of them and it stopped over the place where the child was. And when they saw the star, they were filled with joy. I am going to find Jesus today. I am overjoyed. I have come to worship a king and I can see where he is now. I am ready. I am overflowing with joy in my life. How about you? Did you wake up this morning going, man, I get to go to church today. I get to worship God with my fellow believers. I get to do it freely. I get to sit in a room with great worship and lighting and the preaching's just okay, but it'll get better. I get to do this. Does that make sense? Like would you wake up rejoicing? Today is the day that the Lord has made. Let us go to God's house and be glad in this day. Did you rejoice in that way this morning? Or did we just kind of go, well, we'll see how good the sermon is? Did we do that? Oh, they didn't play Oceans today. Not my favorite song, right? Right? Or are we really just ready for the presence of God? These wise men, they were just hungry to worship him. And when they saw his star, they were like, wow, it's time. I'm going to have joy. I'm going to pursue him. Anybody ready for that today? Yeah, let's do that in everything we do. And it doesn't have to be in a church building. Let everything you do glorify God. and rejoice every opportunity you have to do that. The next thing is they presented gifts. When they saw King Jesus, baby Jesus, lying there, they were ready. For however long they were on those camels or donkeys or walking or whatever, they carried with them precious goods because they wanted to be prepared to greet a king. It was common practice that when you went into a new nation and you came before the king, that you would bring a gift to honor that king. And when they came into the nation of Israel and they got to Jerusalem and they came to the King Herod's palace, they didn't give the gifts because they were ready to greet the King of Kings, Jesus. And so when they got to Jesus, they opened up what the Bible says their treasure chest and they gave their very best. Look at this in Matthew chapter 2, verse 11. They entered the house and saw the child with his mother, Mary. And they bowed down and they worshiped him, and they opened their treasure chest and they gave him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Now, these were three very, very precious items. You guys probably know the value of gold, right? Okay, if you didn't know, it's valuable. It's very valuable. It's precious. But frankincense and myrrh, I didn't grow up with frankincense and myrrh. How about you? Like right now, if you're an essential oil type person, you got some frankincense floating around, rubbing it all your wounds and whatever. I don't know what it does, but it's like you got some of that, right? But myrrh, you're like still, nobody knows. So frankincense is a type of incense, and the name just means good incense. That's all it means. It's actually a French word. It just means good incense, which they would use this incense to burn in offering to God, true God, false gods, whatever. It was a form of an incense that would burn for worship. And then myrrh was a similar material that was often refined into an oil or a perfume because it smelled good. And I can imagine the way things smelled back then, and they would like a lot of these smelly substances to be very good, right? So they had this as a perfume, and it was often used as a burial kind of spice or a burial kind of oil for that embalmment process or preparing a body for death. And so these three gifts speak so much because they were very intentional gifts. They weren't just like, let's see what we got in the back that we don't want anymore that we're going to give to this guy. You guys never did a gift like that before, did you? Like re-gift? I never even opened it. I'm just going to re-gift it, right? You guys have never done that. Ever. Never? Okay, good. So anyway, so they get these gifts. They're precious. They're valuable. And then they take these gifts and they give them to Jesus, and the gold represents the royalty. When it was customary to present to a king something of great value, and gold has great value. And so they presented to Jesus this gold, and it meant that he was royal. The frankincense that they presented to him was an incense that was used in the worship of God and other gods, and it really spoke to the divinity of Jesus. That he was in fact divine, that he was 100% man, but he was 100% God. And they recognized that, and they gave this frankincense as a form of worship and speaking to the divinity of Jesus. And then the myrrh, which was refined into an oil and used in the burial process, the preparation of the body for burial, spoke to his ultimate sacrifice that he would one day make. And so these kings, they come with a gift, and they give the gift that says, you're royal. And you're divine, and your ultimate sacrifice will make an impact on all of mankind. Talk about intentional gifts, right? Now, as symbolic as these gifts are, they were also extremely practical gifts. Because if you keep reading on in the story, we haven't read this portion yet, you'll see that these gifts had great value for Jesus and his parents. Check it out. The verse goes on. After the wise men were gone, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream. Get up, flee to Egypt with the child and his mother. The angel said, stay there until I tell you to return, because Herod's going to search for the child to kill him. Do you guys know that Jesus went to Egypt as a baby? He wasn't just in Jerusalem all the time. He wasn't just in Israel all the time, or Judea and Samaria. He actually, as a young child, went to Egypt to escape. His parents took him there to escape being killed by Herod. Now, here's a question for you. Joseph was a carpenter And he was living in northern Israel, and the census came that made them move down to Bethlehem for the census, right? And Jesus was born there. And so I'm not sure if Joseph had a job while he was in Bethlehem or not, but probably work was a little bit harder to find because everybody's moving all over the place. And then all of a sudden, last minute, Joseph and his fiancée, Mary, and their young baby child had to go to an entirely different nation that the journey would have taken anywhere from 10 to 15, 16 days to get there, staying there and then traveling back. How did a young carpenter, his fiancée, and a baby pay for all of that? You ever think of that? How did they do that? Well, the wise men, as symbolic as their gifts were, those gifts were exceedingly practical, weren't they? They gave it in worship. They gave it in, you're royal, Jesus. You are divine. Your sacrifice is powerful. But also, as symbolic as those gifts were, they were great provision. So as much symbolism is as much provision at the same time. They didn't know that they were providing for Jesus. They just were worshiping him. And I wonder how many times in our life, as we worship him with our time and our energy and our money, and we're very intentional with everything we do, we're saying, God, I'm worshiping you because you're divine. God, I'm worshiping you because of your sacrifice. God, I'm worshiping you because you're royal, so I will give of myself. How many times God has taken those very gifts and done something very practical with them? Who in here has ever given and thought, man, I wonder if that's the end of it? I wonder what my money does. I wonder what my time, my energy, my effort does. I wonder what my life, as I pour it out as an offering to God, I wonder what it's doing. I wonder if the wise men ever thought that. They did it as worship, but God used it as provision. And when we give as a church, we give as worship, don't we? But God turns that around, and he begins to turn it into provision for the world around us. Sometimes that's spiritual provision. People get to know Christ. Sometimes that's a provision physically where someone needs a house, they get a house. Where there's a home, they need a home. There's a vehicle, they need a vehicle. When they need food, there's food. It could do any of those things. Spiritual or physical in nature. Maybe it's emotional help. But whatever it is, that worship that we give, God can then turn into provision for something else. And as Jesus grew in stature before man and stature before God, and he began to teach and he started his earthly ministry, he has this phrase that the Apostle Paul reminds us of in the book of Acts. He says this, "You should remember the words of the Lord Jesus. It is more blessed to give than to receive." Now, this time of year, this verse comes up a lot, doesn't it? Like we're talking about Christmas and it's better to give than receive. And I honestly believe that. I don't need anything on Christmas except for the joy on my kids' faces. That's all I need. When they're just tearing in and just, whoa, that's so amazing. But I wonder sometimes if God looks at us and has that same sort of emotion. See, he gave his son Jesus as a gift for humanity, to take away sin and provide new life. And he's presented this gift before us. But unless we open it and get to see just all that it is and the joy it brings into our life, God's up in heaven going, just open it, man. Just waiting. Could you imagine your kids run out of their bedrooms and they go to the Christmas tree and they just look at all the gifts and they're like, it's beautiful. I really like hanging out with you guys. I think we did a couple good things this week. See ya. We know that would never happen. Ever. They'll rip into it and they'll go, oh, thank you, Dad. Thank you, Mom. You're the best in the whole world, right? But our Father in heaven is looking down and saying, man, I've given you a great, big gift of a new life. But the only way this gift works in our life is if we receive it. If we open it up and we say, God, yes, absolutely, I'm all over this. I want new life in you. Thank you for that new life. And the joy on your face is what stirs his heart towards you even more. So this morning, you may be in here and you might be going, TJ, this is all great, but I don't think I've opened his gift yet. I think he's placed the gift before me. I know who Jesus is. I know that he died on the cross and he rose again, but I don't know anything else beyond that. Well, here's why he did that. He took upon himself the weight of your sin. The things that we have done, I've done, everybody in this room has done, the iniquities, the sin, the brokenness of our life, took it upon himself. And he paid the price for that on the cross. But he didn't stay dead, but he rose again and overcame death, hell, and the grave so that you and I could have new life. He took our unrighteousness upon himself and gave us true righteousness. He took the brokenness and the sin of us upon himself and gave us sinlessness in response. There was this exchange, this trade that happened. And this morning, if you've never said, you know what, I want to receive that, I want to open that up, I want to have that gift today. Today is your day to do that. And it's a good day to do that. As we're intentional this year with Christmas. We're intentional about the gifts that God has given us, and we're intentional about the gifts we're going to be giving. The way we're going to live, the intentional way we care for the world, and the intentional way we're generous. Now, if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to have a moment where you get to reflect on what God is doing in your life. Maybe close your eyes, bow your heads. But I would ask nobody moving around, no noises, just a real quiet moment. Because I want you to hear from God. I want you to hear his voice in everything we do. For some of us this morning, God is challenging you to find more intentionality in your everyday. Intentional time with family. Intentional time in generosity and caring for the world around you. Intentionally loving the world as Jesus loved the world. And you're praying about it. And you want God to speak. I believe now he's going to speak. For some of you, you've been distanced from God. And the gift of his son, Jesus, has remained unwrapped before you. Can I encourage you, today is the day to do that, to unwrap that gift of Jesus and let him into your life. Let him lead your life and point you in the direction you're supposed to go. If that's you, I want to pray a prayer, and it's a simple, quiet prayer. And it simply just says, God, I want what you have. Take away everything that's not supposed to be here. If that's you, why don't you pray this prayer quietly right where you are. Father, this morning I receive the gift of Jesus. I receive what he did on a cross for me. I receive new life. And today I say thank you. Thank you for this new life. Thank you for the joy you're placing inside of me, the peace and the intentional life, the real purpose-filled life that you have for me. God, give me the strength and the hope to live this out. In your name we pray. Everybody says, amen. Why don't you put your hands together for people to just pray that prayer.
Thank you so much for joining us online today. If you prayed that prayer with us, we would like to help you on your spiritual journey. If you don't mind going to theshorechurch.com or emailing us at hello@theshorechurch.com, we can send you some information to start this spiritual journey of faith. And of course, we'd always love to see you in person at The Shore Church, 3375 Fruitvale Road.